So, but he was kind enough to send us a welcoming remark, and he was very adamant to do so.
Сейчас? Да. Oh, sorry.
Dear colleagues, I'm really sorry that I cannot be at your conference in Moscow. I have to be here in Nottingham, looking after my students. I have worked for many years with academician Panchenko, Vladislav Yakovlevich, and we first met 32 years ago at a conference in Czechoslovakia, near Prague, and we have been in contact and collaborating ever since, particularly through his colleague who sadly died earlier this year, Viktor Bagratashvili. And this conference that you're attending started almost by chance when Vladislav Yakovlevich was visiting Nottingham, I think about a year ago, and he met Galina Pavlovskaya, and they started talking, and the idea of this conference arose and has been developed over the past year. So I'm really excited that the collaboration between Russia and Nottingham has taken an extra step and is being broadened out very considerably. As you will have heard from Peter Morris's introduction, Nottingham has a long tradition in MRI and magnetic resonance in general. And I am still very proud that our university won the Nobel Prize through the work of Sir Peter Mansfield in the field of MRI. I have never worked in magnetic resonance, though I have a particular love for the element xenon, because I worked for many years looking at infrared spectroscopy of materials dissolved in liquid xenon. Infrared spectra, you may remember, the absorptions are caused by the vibrations of atoms in a molecule. But xenon has only one atom in the molecule and cannot vibrate. Therefore, it does not absorb infrared light at all. And so it is a dream solvent for studying the spectra of dissolved molecules. And so for many years, I did research involving spectroscopy in liquid xenon, and my colleague, Professor Mike George, is now doing some really very elegant experiments looking at xenon complexes of a whole series of transition metals. I know you're not chemists, but you can see there are some transition metals on my tie here. So I very much hope that this conference is going to be a real success. For the past 2 years, I have been working with the Russian Foundation of Basic Research, which, as you know, Vladislav Yakovlevich is the president of the RFBR, and we have been working together on the topic of science diplomacy. This is ensuring that there is strong scientific contact between scientists in different countries across the world, irrespective of the political situation between their governments. And in May, I was privileged to be one of the guest speakers at a conference organized by Vladislav Yakovlevich, coinciding with the meeting of the Global Research Council in Moscow. He is co-chair of the Global Research Council, something that I'm really pleased about. And I gave a lecture explaining how important it is for scientists in different countries to have strong scientific discussions. So I really hope that in this conference here in Moscow, or rather there in Moscow, that you will have great success and all sorts of new scientific collaborations will be formed. It is really important that it is not only old scientists like me that are collaborating, but it is the younger scientists, the new generation, that need to form their collaborations that will go on for a long time in the future. Now, the Russian delegates will know that Mendeleev, the founder of the periodic table, was famous not only for the periodic table, but also for measurements of the strength of vodka. And here I have a bottle of Mendeleev vodka, and you can see the periodic table on the front. So I feel it is appropriate, since we're having this conference, that I should drink a toast to the success of your conference. So notice that I also have a Polyakov vodka glass. Polyakov is a rival brand, a French brand of vodka. The Mendeleev vodka is better. So I will drink to the success of your conference. За успеха вашей конференции. Желаю вам всего доброго и надеюсь, что у вас будет очень удачная конференция. За вами. Спасибо за внимание.
Дорогие коллеги, замечательное выступление. Мне хотелось бы поблагодарить профессора Полякова, что он вспомнил таблицу Менделеева, потому что весь мир пользуется периодической системой химической. И очень мало кто знает из производства периодическая таблица Менделеева.
19 год?
Я сейчас тоже скажу, да. Будет 150 лет Менделееву через год. И, наверное, мы как-то отметим это.
Международный год биологической системы 150 лет.
Очень хорошо. Было очень приятно услышать выдающегося английского ученого формулировку периодическая система Менделеева. Это не всегда случается.
So it was very nice to hear the mentioning of the periodic Mendeleev table in the Sir Martin's presentation, because Mendeleev was he professor?
No, he was in St. Petersburg.
Although he was a professor in St. Petersburg State University, or St. Petersburg University. So nonetheless, the next year there will be 150 years since Mendeleev's birthday, and for that, the year of 2019 will be a year of the Mendeleev periodic table. And though I'm not sure about it, but so it has been mentioned that in the world, the periodic table is not known as being named after Mendeleev. I'm not sure, because in America, this is one of the GRE questions, or credit for the examination questions, who was the father of periodic table. And Mendeleev is one of the options in the multiple choice, and that is the right one. So.
Профессор Поляков напомнил мне, что мы должен был вас приветствовать профессор Панченко Владислав Яковлевич. Он руководит у нас фондом научным всей страны, и как раз сейчас его пригласили в правительство на разговоры, и он просил передать его добрые слова, поприветствовать вас и сказать, что он присоединится к конференции где-то вот спустя несколько часов, когда заседание закончится.
Yeah, Sir Martin also mentioned academician Vladislav Panchenko, who is a head of, well, he's for the British people to understand, so he's kind of like the same as the head of EPSRC here in Russia. And right now, he was supposed to be here this morning, but he was called for government duties to Kremlin. And as soon as that wraps up, he'll be back here with us. So in a couple of hours.
Thank you very much. Сейчас я должен пригласить, согласно программе, профессор Игорь Коптюк из Новосибирска.
And now, so we delegate the welcome remarks to Professor Igor Koptyuk from Novosibirsk State University.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Igor Koptyuk. I'm one of the mentors of this meeting. And also I represent a team which comes from the city of Novosibirsk in Russia. We all work at the International Tomography Center, already mentioned by Professor Lunin in his welcoming speech. So this meeting is about both MRI and hyperpolarization, and at our International Tomography Center we actually do both. We have a medical MRI department, we do magnetic resonance microimaging of materials and chemical reactions, but we also do hyperpolarization, and with the hope basically to combine MRI and hyperpolarization in a novel technique basically. So I think it's actually a very good idea to organize this meeting here in Russia, in Moscow, the Moscow State University, because as you know, the field of hyperpolarization and its applications in MRI is a very rapidly growing and very promising field of scientific research, and also very promising for novel medical applications. And I would say it's a high time to join forces both on the national and the international level. And I wish you all a very successful, very pleasant meeting, and also your stay here in Moscow. Thank you.
Nottingham University, Professor Thomas Meyersmann.
While this is coming up, good morning. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. It's a great honor for me to be here. I'd really like to thank Professor Yuri Berghoff and all the local organizers who have made this happen. And of course, on the Nottingham side, Professor Morris, and in particular, Galina Palovska, you have worked very hard to make this happen, this meeting today. It's also a great pleasure for me to see my dear colleagues that I know from either collaboration or from meetings. And of course, I can particularly point out Dr. Shenko Wang, who is my collaborator at the University of Nottingham at the U. And and of course, you know, for many conferences was a very, very extremely well-known name in the world of hyperpolarized magnetic resonance. And lastly, I'd like to say I'm extraordinarily pleased to see Professor Kulikov talking about, when he talks about MRI, coming up with xenon as the first example of that. Of course, the possibility to do MRI with xenon is only possible because of the technology of hyperpolarization. So for novel gases in general, hyperpolarization is absolutely crucial if you want to do MRI with it. Of course, there's not just xenon, we're going to talk also about krypton. That's less known in the world of hyperpolarized MRI, but it is a good candidate for pulmonary diagnostics. In general, the tendency is towards precision medicine. There's a symposium about hyperpolarized MRI in precision medicine. But of course, it's away from just doing statistics and getting some statistical analysis, but looking at a particular patient with a particular need that this patient has, a particular prognosis for the disease, a particular treatment, following up on the treatment with diagnosis to enable a very stratified approach for that patient to improve to fight the disease, whatever disease there is. Right. Let's see how I do this here. What options, if we talk about lung imaging and hyperpolarized novel gas MRI, is mostly for lungs. It can also be used for the brain, but that's been shown there. For lungs, it's particularly important because when we look at traditional MRI, which is proton MRI, we can look at lungs, but it's difficult because of relatively low tissue density. Capable parameters for traditional proton MRI in the lung, and it has to do with the heterogeneity of the tissue. You have this air tissue interface, and that creates problems for the MRI. In particular, it creates field gradients that then translate into very short transverse relaxation times, to start times. There's motion in there. We can deal to some extent with that. And structural imaging is possible, and it's getting better. We should not dismiss that. It's getting better as we speak. There's a lot of work now done with the UT MRI. Particularly my former student, Professor Zach Cleveland, he's now working on this in Cincinnati Children's Hospital. There are others, but I'm aware of that work, and it's pretty good. But it's still difficult to compete with computed tomography, except, of course, it's non-invasive. Computed tomography obviously uses radiation. Functional imaging is, however, limited. One can use oxygen-enhanced MRI. It's been tried in place, in particular Nottingham is now really advancing this. And of course, I can use angiography. There, this is actually quite successful. If you look at the perfusion MRI, in general, you have two choices. You have either high structural resolution, but then you have low temporal resolution, and then the motion artifacts come in, and you don't really see also what actually happens on an ongoing time scale with the lung. Or you have something like perfusion MRI, but there you have low contrast. Here's a nice example of a very high structural image of the vascular side of the lung. Here is a temporal. Here's some temporal images of the perfusion in the lung, of the blood perfusion in the lung, and it has very low spatial resolution. There are, of course, radioactive technologies like SPECT and TET that can be used to allow for ventilation imaging. Obviously, the lung, the very important part is to get the gas in the first place, so the ventilation part is very often impaired by a number of diseases that can do this. It allows also to determine the volume perfusion ratio. That's, of course, the next important part, the gas going into the lung, into the bloodstream. But it has low resolution. It is invasive. It is radioactive. And here are some examples. They are interesting and certainly helpful to some extent. But if we can replace this, it can be replaced by a non-invasive MRI technique that has better resolution. Certainly, that would be very helpful. This has been accomplished with hyperpolarized xenon and helium. Helium was the first that was tried for lung MRI, and you see this is a conventional proton MRI. You hardly see the lung. You can make that better visible if you focus more on it, but that's just an example. Here we typically only see some of the vascular part of the lung. Then here's hyperpolarized gas. It's a contrast agent inhaled. This is helium. You see with very high structural resolution and temporal resolution. You can do this very quickly. What's going on in the lung? Here's hyperpolarized xenon, and I'm sure Sheng-Bo Wang will give you some more examples of that later on in this workshop. They're giving about the same information here when it comes to ventilation. Here are some examples why you want to do this. Here are some of these examples are from my colleagues involved, but you see obstruction in the ventilation here and co-occurring lung cancer and COPD. This is of course a very extreme case, in which case you could have used the CT to see this, but it is just an example of how this can work. So how does this entire thing work? So how can we make a gas visible for MRI? The problem with MRI is always is the sensitivity is not very high. If you look at traditional MRI, we're looking at water. And water is abundant in the body, so there's no problem with that. But when it comes to gases, we get very, very low signal intensities. Here's now the example of xenon, and the reason for that one is simply in the spin physics and the thermodynamics of it. If you have two energy levels that we have in MRI, but we're looking at the spin 1/2 system in the magnetic field, they are no longer degenerate. And the transition between that gives us this signal. That's the signal that we're using to make these images, right? For additional application of the field gradient. But if the difference, the population difference between these energy levels is not very high, the signal is very weak. And in MRI, the difference in the population is not very high. At high temperature or room temperature, the differences is very little, giving us still enough signal if you look at water, but if you look at the gas, well, then you have, of course, a problem. Then we have a problem. Now, a technique is out there called optical pumping, where you can change this population difference very favorably. You're cooling the system down, it's like cooling it down to about 10 to 100 millikelvin. And at that temperature, the gas is still at room temperature or body temperature, but the spins are at low temperature. By laser technology, laser pumping technology, you're now getting, even in the gas phase, very strong signals that are similar to that what you would have from water, not hyperpolarized. Hyperpolarized gas gives you a signal similar to that of water that's not hyperpolarized. How does this work? Very briefly, I want to focus more on some of the applications. We have to use light, circular polarized light. This is a methodology developed by Alfred Kastler, the École Normale Supérieure in Paris. He got the Nobel Prize for that somewhere in the 60s, I don't know exactly when. And what it is to eliminate rubidium atoms in the gas phase. If you warm up rubidium to 100 degrees Celsius roughly, you have enough for about 10 to the 13 of these atoms per cubic centimeter. And you can eliminate them, and the outer electron, the S electron of the rubidium, can then be pumped. Here in this pumping diagram, we are pumping this, we have relaxation happening. What is crucial here is these are the two spin orientations, the two energy levels, in this case the electron energy levels. Only one of them is depleted by this pumping process, whereas the other one is eventually enriched, and you're getting a spin polarization or a hyperpolarization, something that you would have at a very low temperature. In this case, it's the higher energy level that is this diagram here. So it's a negative temperature, but that can be easily manipulated. So now you have that with rubidium in the gas phase, rubidium electrons, and there's another gentleman here, William Hepper from Princeton University, who came up with a brilliant idea of trying to transfer these electron spin polarization to the nuclear spin polarization of xenon. And this works through spin exchange. So the entire process is called spin exchange optical pumping. Remember, this was Kastler's part, this here is William Hepper's. And what happens in the gas phase, the electron spin and the nuclear spin can undergo two collisions, the spin exchange. That can happen or not happen, but because we're constantly keeping the electrons of the rubidium at a certain alignment and a certain level, eventually we will get the nuclear alignment of the xenon in the same way, the same spin temperature that the rubidium has, not quite exactly the same, but very high polarization, very high signal intensity. In this situation here, which we want, and the first pictures that you saw from that first slide showing Alex Pines from the University of Berkeley he was the first one to actually do this at high field. And that paved the way for all the MRI and NMR and we're doing spectroscopy that we're doing with hyperpolarized xenon to this day. And of course, you can do it with xenon, you can also do it with xenon. I will not go into the details. We are building most of the instrumentation that we're using, not the MRI part, but the optical pumping part, the spin exchange optical pumping part. Here are some examples of the work that we're doing. This is with these are runs from rats. They're actually ex vivo in this case, and this is a control lung here, and this is a it's a control lung. And here is the asthmatic lung. And what you see is ventilation heterogeneity in the asthmatic lung as an asthma model in these animals. But what's more important is the reaction towards certain drugs. Here, methacholine causes an asthma attack. And the salbutamol is what, if you have an asthma attack, as a patient is given to you to relax the lung muscles, and it reverses the asthma attack. We studied this, and if you look at this, you can't see so much from that. I mean, from a distance, probably less. You see the heterogeneity, but you don't really see what's going on. So very important, even in these as ventilation images, is to have the right data analysis. Here's an example of that. These are the same thing here, control lungs, here's the asthma model. And what you see here, the projection is not particularly great, but you see certain regions that are affected by the asthma attack, the simulated asthma attack. And blue is now increased flow, a decreased flow, red is increased. You see the reversal as the drug is given that, and it's usually is given to patients who have an acute asthma attack. And you can study that in the control. There's an effect that you see, but it's, if you look at the real numbers, much more severe in the asthma model. And you can see where regionally this is happening, not just globally. Normal lung function measurements are global lung function measurements. This is a regional measure. You can go further with xenon. Xenon doesn't have just one resonance line. I showed you that at the beginning with a lot of noise without optical pumping, and then when you hyperpolarize it, very nice signal to noise. It's that peak here, it's the gas phase peak. It's huge if you really excited to the full extent. But if you look into a lung, what you find is there are more peaks than just that. And what this is the gas phase. The gas phase, you have a particular resonance, and you can do the imaging here. That's Carsten Greenhouse at Duke University. Yes, that's the gas phase MRI of a rodent lung, and that's simply the xenon in the void space. And then when the xenon dissolves in the parenchyma, in the lung walls, you see a distinctly different resonance line. You see that can be used for imaging. This is now the imaging of xenon dissolved in the parenchyma. And when it goes into the blood, it interacts with the red blood cells. It's a slight shift. We'll be able to make that visible. And you see here in this lung lobe here, it's again a model, an animal model. Nothing arrives, and the primacy allows for that. That means on that side of the lung, the parenchyma has been thickened. This is interstitial disease, such as fibrosis, IPF, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, for example, where the walls thicken and the xenon just can't go through quickly. And of course, that's what's happening then with the oxygen too. People can inhale, they can ventilate, but the oxygen doesn't end up in the bloodstream. It's a somewhat simplified way of saying it, of course, but in this technology can make that visible. The book of Professor Ian Hall at the University of Nottingham, my university, is looking exactly now developing this for the human subjects and other people who have done this over. It's an interesting area, but you saw that the signals were not particularly strong. You need very high sensitivity for this. Either high hyperpolarization or what could be potentially because this high number that we have, of course, about. Of course, you can go further. You can functionalize xenon. There are cages where the xenon gets trapped. Not really trapped, that's the wrong word. It gets shortly absorbed, goes in, comes out, maybe in the 10-100 millisecond regime. It's a rapid exchange of xenon from dissolved in the liquid here to these cages. And here you see the liquid phase xenon, that's the same, similar to the one that you would have in tissue, but then shifted to that is where it is different. And you can functionalize these cages so they particularly interact with biosensors, target molecules that are upregulated in disease and then affect the biosensors. So it's a you have a spatially resolved imaging, molecular imaging of the target molecule, simply because it's packed like in fluorescence mainly, but now with MRI by this molecule, by this cage molecule that can then be used to image this, not just to see it in the slice with the fluorescence, but to see inside the body where these molecules are upregulated. Now, when that happens, you get also slight shifts, there are more shifts here, it gets more complicated. The problem is that's not a very, from that point, not very sensitive. There are very small changes here in the chemical shift, and there are various strategies to amplify those or to do it in some way that you can make these molecular imaging feasible, but in general, if you have only very small shifts, that's a bit problematic because, you know, in the body, in a Mars tube, you can do all kinds of experiments. In the whole body, the lines are more coordinated, of course, the stability from the body. So this is a bit difficult. We thought about a different strategy of doing this molecular sensing. And we kind of took an example from some work that was done by this Japanese group. What they were doing is they were using 19F, not hyperpolarized, just normal standard MRI, NMR in this case, or MRI to some extent. And this 19F is linked, molecularly linked to gadolinium. And gadolinium is a paramagnetic agent that relaxes the fluorine very, very rapidly. And when this linker here is broken by something, by some chemical reaction, then the separation happens between the gadolinium, this paramagnetic agent, and the fluorine. And as a consequence, the relaxation changes, because the relaxation, in this case, the T2 is the same as true for T1, we will see that in a moment, is a function here of, I'm sorry, this is wrong, plus 6, so 1 over, no, sorry, that's right. The relaxation rate here, that's 1 over the relaxation time, is proportional to the distance to the power of -6. So the larger the distance, the less the relaxation. It's pretty dramatic effect. So when you keep this, the relaxation changes dramatically. Here is a molecule that we designed in Nottingham, and we did some of this work. And what you see over time, as you start to put in and I should explain this. This is a linker that is sensitive to a particular target molecule. And the target molecule is MMP. That's a protein, matrix metalloprotease, that is upregulated in certain diseases. And when that's present, it will cleave this sequence here of amino acids, this amino acid chain, selectively and break this molecule apart. If other MMPs or MMPs not present at all, or just slightly modified MMPs, it will not touch this. When it does that, what happens over time, it's a little bit difficult to see here. This line narrows considerably. It's initially very broad, it narrows, and as a consequence of that, the signal intensity goes up over time. And one can use that in imaging. Here are 3 samples, that's a control. Here's the sensor, here's the sensor. What you see initially is very little because the signal is very low. As then the MMP, this protein, is given into this and only this container, you see the signal emerges, giving you a positive response. MMP is present in this location, in this case in this NMR tube, meaning in this NMR tube there is MMP in this case, and in the body this would mean there is an upregulation of MMP, which means there is indicative of a particular disease. You can make that specific for all kinds of MMPs, so that's of course possible to look at very specific ones for specific diseases. However, the problem is it's not just the T2 relaxation rate that is reduced, but also the T1, making this a very, very slow experiment that takes about 40 minutes just in this little NMR tube, leave alone in an animal or a human. It would be very slow. However, let me illustrate this. This is the MMP2 or MMP9 sensor, specific for these proteins. And you see that the T1 time in its intact form is very short, 15 milliseconds. So is the T2 time. And if you cleave this by adding the MMP, the relaxation time goes up almost to a second here, whereas the T2 also goes up. And it's that effect that's being used to make this visible, but it's that effect here that makes it slow. And our idea was, well, you know, in principle, you do something like this, you shorten it to make it visible. It's paramagnetic relaxation enhancement. Why not using that as in the sensor? Here's again the example. We're adding MMP, it breaks apart, and you see the T2 time, T2 relaxation rate, goes down, making these particular peak visible. You just saw this and this before. There's some more as the time goes on. But if you use a T1-based technique, you can actually make this and this visible. Here, this is called UT. It's a ultra-fast echo sequence that can deal with the short T2 times. Then you can take advantage of the T1. And as you see, as the time goes on, the signal here appears, but here the signal disappears. So a negative signal, a negative contrast, a disappearing signal, is now indicative of the presence of this target protein. And of course, the T1 time is, of course, also short. And this is PRE, the paramagnetic relaxation enhancement that we see. And of course, you could ask, well, if you see this, how do you know if it disappears, it has been cleaved? Maybe it was just transported away. It's in the body. I mean, not in our NMR tube, we know it's not still there. But in a body, in an animal, in a human, how do we know it's still there? Well, it's a fairly simple way to check this. We have here, again, the same thing. This time we don't use UT, we actually are able to do it with simple very fast radium echo experiment, fluorine 19 grading experiment. Here are the samples. These contain the biosensor. This and this are some controls, never mind 5 and 4, but here 1, 2, 3. These is where the biosensors are. And we can make them visible. And then we look over time. We add again MMP, and you see a weakening here of this one. And here we don't add anything, we just dilute it. We say, oh, it's the same kind of weakening. And then you can take the difference between those two. The difference between those two, and you see these two have a positive response. But we know, oh, sorry, this is a false positive. Now we can make that visible with proton MRI. Here's the proton inversion recovery experiment. It's a technique where if you set it right, you can measure it at one time. Or in this case, we did it even simpler. We just used the null transition to make those biosensors disappear. Only those disappear. They have a particular relaxation rate. If it gets slower or faster, it would reappear here. It will not get faster, but it will get slower. So as we now dilute something, we see it showing up here in this kind of conversion recovery. We show it, seeing it up here. Where it has reacted, there's no change. So now we can take the difference again. And where there's a positive response, means that in our fluorine MRI, this was a false positive. So we know this one is the true positive. This is where MMP is present. This is where the disease is present. The other one is just transportation. Of course, both can happen simultaneously. You need to make this a bit more robust. But first of all, one thing, of course, is to move up the intensity, and one thing was to use xenon for this. And here's again our cage, and it's connected to, it is linked to a paramagnetic agent. And if you have that, the xenon going through the cage will relax, and that means it loses its hyperpolarization. It will disappear from the animal. And what you see here is the xenon still there, but now we put a cleaver in there, and what we're getting is the hyperpolarized xenon not being deactivated. So the presence of this linker, this our model system, now indicates, is indicated by a strong signal, by a positive response, because this particular molecular sensor has been deactivated, and we can check for the presence of these tendency with hyperpolarized xenon. We have done some preliminary work that looks at the relaxation rates, and without going into details, there are dramatic differences if you keep this paramagnetic relaxation away from this case. So I don't think I have terribly much time. How much time do you have left?
You have 5 minutes.
Yes. Okay, and I want to also first point out that we're not just working with xenon. There are other ways to do contrast with hyperpolarized novel gases, and krypton is one that was specifically developed in Nottingham. Krypton has a spin 9.5, that's a quadrupolar nucleus, and in the gas phase it has reasonably long relaxation times, many minutes. And we can pump it, we can hyperpolarize it to a very high level. Here, xenon typically to 60, whatever, in this particular technique that we're using, 60%, 70%, now 65%. Whereas the krypton, well, not too bad. We're getting almost to 30%. The highest we got was about 30. And that is good enough to do MRI. It's not quite the same quality in terms of resolution as you have with other techniques, but it's getting there. Now, why would we do this? The answer is because it is relaxation again is indicative of some disease, or in this case, the reduced relaxation. I'll show you this very quickly. In the gas phase, this signal disappears very slowly, whereas in surfaces, it decays very fast. And it's because the surface is that causes the krypton to deform, and that's when this quadrupolarization kicks in. It's specific for surface. We call this surface quadrupolar relaxation or SPARE, and it can be used to produce this contrast. It is also dependent on the chemistry of the surface. These are glass beads, just ordinary glass beads. The relaxation time in the outer part here, 35 seconds. In the inner part, these glass beads have been coated with a siliconizing agent, and the relaxation time is significantly reduced. And you can make that visible as time goes on. This is detected in the gas phase, but it tells the story about the surface. Depends on surface to volume, surface chemistry, surface temperature, competitive core absorption, and the solution below surface. But the first two are important: the surface to volume and the surface chemistry. And of course, surface to volume is an effect in lungs. So when you have emphysema, for instance, emphysema, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, specifically emphysema, destroys the alveoli, and the surface to volume goes up. Here is a model of this, and the hypothesis was that our krypton relaxation will change. Here is again a rat lung. We are putting this krypton in. We see the decay. We put a map out there. Blue means everything is fine, very fast, relaxing. But now look at the emphysema model. You see heterogeneity, but that's many lung diseases have that. But the color here changes, the relaxation changes, indicative of the presence of reduced surface to volume. There are many examples, and again, I'm not going to go through this in detail. We can extract certain parameters here, and we get nice biomarkers that are based on that relaxation of the last not least, we are also working, of course, on technology, how to build and to make this happen. One of the problems here with the krypton is that it is in a very strong diluted system. This is only 5% krypton in the gas phase for the optical pumping, for the laser pumping process. So we needed to find a way, here's the krypton diluted by nitrogen, to make this nitrogen gas go away. And the xenon, that's easy. I'm not going to get into the details, I don't have the time, but for krypton, it's not. And one thing that we figured out, that we can do the same thing here with hydrogen as a buffer gas. And what we're doing is we're simply reacting the hydrogen away with the catalytic reaction here. Oxygen put in, that produces this krypton. There's a poster out there, Saleh, students will give you more of these details. So, and I think I'm not going to go through the some of these examples, except for the results. What we found is that the polarization is not affected by this combustion process because it's so fast. We have something that happens in 10 milliseconds. There isn't much relaxation that can go. Okay. So without going into a summary, but what we're doing in Nottingham, and I hope to work together now with Moscow State on this one, is developing some of the fundamentals here, developing the instrumentation, showing new contrast, and getting it into, this is a step that is ongoing, into a human subject imaging system. Fundamental ideas from fundamental physics to the hospital lab. That's the translation, and that's my lab is for translational imaging. That's exactly what we're trying to do, and that's very similar what Professor Berghoff has been done so successfully over the years, the Elizabeth Nobel Prizes. Last but not least, to thank a few people here. There are many people who work on the Krypton over the years, from the people here, Saleh, Jan, a graduate student working on this. Dimitri Volkov came over and worked quite successfully in the project. Very nice. You see various people here. One person I want to point out, not so much for past collaboration, but ongoing future collaboration is Dr. Sheng Wang from Ningbo. We are trying to develop hyperpolarized xenon, and for hospital studies, there are very large patient cohorts there, giving you a way to study the technology. I'd like to thank you for your patience.
We have a few minutes for questions. Do somebody has questions?
I can translate the questions.
Nobody can ask. Somebody has. No? Then no questions, and thank you very much for before we break, we have another lecture. Our speaker is Professor Bekova. He will tell us about strategy of Russian healthcare in another 5 years. That's right?
Уважаемые коллеги, меня организаторы просили говорить на английском языке. Моя презентация будет доступна на моем сайте, я его оставлю. И сегодня и сейчас я вас подниму с микроуровня газов на макроуровень всей системы здравоохранения. So I just said that I will go up from the micro level to the macro level. And I will give a picture of Russian healthcare system as a whole, at a glance, today and tomorrow. So our main goal was set by the president in his presidential decree that we need to increase life expectancy from the present 73 years to the 78 years till 2024. So I'll speak about Russian health status, population health status, factors affecting our healthcare system today and tomorrow. So health status of Russian population. With whom we can compare Russian healthcare system and our health status? With the new European countries, 8 of them, like Czech Republic, Poland, Slovenia, Slovakia, and some other countries, who have the same GDP per capita as Russia has. And so if we take the new European countries, they will be always in green, and the Russian Federation is in red, and the all European countries are dark blue. So our life expectancy, the key characteristic of the population health, is nearly for 5 years lower than in new European countries. The same indicator they had nearly 20 years ago, and in all European countries 43 years ago. The most problem is the life expectancy of men. They live for 6 years less than men in new European countries. And the difference between life expectancy, between Russian men and Russian women is the highest in the world, more than 10 years. Infant mortality is decreasing, and this is an example of effective policy of Russian Ministry of Health, but it is still 40% higher than in new European countries. And they had the same indicator nearly 10 years ago. Standardized death rate from infectious disease in Russia is 3.5 times higher than in new European countries, and increasing, unfortunately, increasing the last years. Standardized death rate from tuberculosis in Russia is 6 times higher than in new European countries. and 23 times higher than in all European countries. Children mortality in Russia is increasing since 1990, is decreasing, and nearly but 2 times higher than in new European countries. The mortality structure in Russia is the following. Nearly 50% is cardiovascular diseases, then 16% neoplasms, and then external causes 8%. General morbidity of the relevance in Russia has grown by 51% since 1990, and this correlates with increase in mortality. And during the last 5 years, we have increased the morbidity for 4 million people. So what kind of factors are affecting the health of the Russian population? So the organization I present, the High School of Healthcare Management, made quantitative assessment what factors affect Russian health, life expectancy. Social economic factors, GDP, for example, grew 40%, lifestyle, 33%, and healthcare, finance and resources for 30%. And let us examine those factors in comparison with other countries. So social economic factor, the average salary in Russia is 1.6 times lower than in new European countries. And just to note, all financial comparisons are done in paritive power dollar. The anti-alcohol policy, which started in 2010, decreased alcohol consumption in Russia almost by 30%. But still, it's 22% higher than in all European countries and 40% times higher than in the United States. Anti-smoking law implemented in Russia led to the tobacco consumption by 16%, but is still the highest in OECD countries and 3 times higher than in the United States that made tremendous efforts to decrease tobacco consumption. So now I'm moving to the healthcare factor influencing population health in Russia, which is responsible for 30% of life expectancy. So Russia has a system, nearly the same system, so Great Britain has nearly the same system as Russia has. So the outpatient care, they're the specialists, is done in polyclinics. They are the specialists and primary care physicians. And we have gatekeeping system. Our planned flow is going to inpatient care, so for elective surgery, and ambulance, which has physicians inside, it is emergency flow. They are 50-50. And tertiary care is done in the federal hospitals. So our budget, the healthcare budget, is consists from federal budget, 16%, regional budget, 30%, and obligatory insurance, approximately 55%. Private payments comprise 40% from all healthcare spending. Altogether, we spend for the healthcare 5% of GDP and 3% from public sources. Nearly all healthcare providers are public institutions, 10% from federal, 85% regional, and only 5% private. So government healthcare expenditures per capita in Russia are nearly 2 times lower than in new European countries. And we spend, as I said, 3% of GDP on the public healthcare spending. Outpatient drugs, so by recipe or the physician in outpatient settings, we spend 4 times lower than in new European countries per capita. Practicing physician density per 1,000 population in Russia is lower than in Germany and at the same level as in all European countries. But we have the high patient flow, which is important to keep in mind when you are thinking about the capacity of healthcare system. Hospital beds per 1,000 population in Russia by 18% lower than in Germany and almost at the same level as in new European countries. So it is important always thinking about the healthcare system. It is very important to keep in mind the patient flow and the capacity of the system. And what happened in Russia from the year 2012 to the year 2015? So the patient flow increased for 7 million, and the density and the capacity of the system decreased. And what does it mean? Even expenditures decrease in constant prices for 18%. What does it mean? We can cure these patients. All the physicians will work hard. I know that the same problems exist in Great Britain hospitals. So efficiency. So, as you know, efficiency is always a comparison, and it's outcome to the resources spent. So we have world efficiency ranking done by Bloomberg. Only 55 countries go in this rating. Those who exceed 70 life expectancy more than 70 years, population more than 5 million, and GDP more than 5,000 per capita. So Great Britain is in the middle. So these are the best 10 countries: Hong Kong, Singapore, Israel. These are the Western countries on healthcare efficiency, and Russia is at the end. The only one satisfactions we are not far from the United States. If we take Russia as a whole and compare Russian regions with healthcare efficiency, you also see the diverse picture. Even the central region has nearly the same ecological conditions. You see that all the regions are different in their healthcare efficiency. So this is something we need to pay an important attention. Now, conditions for achieving the life expectancy 78 years till the year 2024. So what are the conditions, the main thing? So we took the scenario: if GDP will grow by 4% annually, and if we decrease alcohol consumption by 40% till the year 2024, so there are 4 scenarios. To reach 78 years, we need to increase annually our healthcare expenditures, public healthcare expenditures, by 10–15% in constant prices. There is no miracle. You spend efficiently, then you have the results. Priorities, indicators, and program till the year 2024. So if we conclude from analysis, our priority is the health of Russian men. The health of Russian men. I know that academician Kamalov is an expert in this field. Then children and adolescents, and people living in rural areas. Why? Because the difference between those who live in disparities and the difference between those who live in towns and those who live in rural areas is dramatic. They live for 2 years less than those who live in big towns. So we need action plan based on scientific analysis. And the action plan we need 2 blocks. The first block, comprehensive healthy lifestyle program. They will give us plus 2.5 years. And this is responsibility of the interdisciplinary responsibility of the whole government, regional governors, and heads of municipalities. And the second block, which is responsibility of the healthcare system, improving quality and availability of the medical care. So in the first block, our priorities: to decrease alcohol consumption for 40%, to decrease tobacco consumption twice, and healthy lifestyles, healthy rational food consumption, and active sports. So I will not stop on this busy slide. These are the programs, interdisciplinary programs, involving different ministries and different governmental bodies, because it is interdisciplinary task. Priorities for organizational and clinical programs, which are in the part of the second block in healthcare system: increasing accessibility of the primary care, increasing accessibility of the outpatient pharmaceuticals, timely accessibility of the urgent and emergency care, and establishing medical and social home care. Here are the 2 programs, and Russian Academy of Science took a very active position in preparing the drafts of the programs for the government. The first programs were done by Russian academician of Russian Academy of Science, clinical scientific programs that are aimed to decrease the mortality from oncological diseases, from cardiovascular diseases, from infectious diseases. And the second are organizational programs, how this will work together in the whole healthcare system. Primary care, accessibility, outpatient drugs, as I mentioned, medical personnel qualification, and some others. So let me briefly discuss the main programs which will lead us to the aim. So we need responsible employers for the health of the employees. This is occupational medicine program, and we need to reestablish, as it was in Soviet times, in big enterprises, the special medical units that were in the Soviet times. And the second topic outside of the healthcare system is the health of schoolboys and schoolgirls in the schools. And for this, we need to prepare and train a lot of nurses just to help to preserve the health of those who study in the schools. The second, the quality of the medical care according to the world standards. For this, we need to dramatically improve our education, basic medical education and postgraduate medical education, and we need to implement the patient safety standards in medical organizations. I know that Great Britain is doing a lot of work with this within the United States, and this is a really important point that we can learn from you. And another one program that I am responsible personally, and that I was taught in Harvard on MBA program that I just graduated for healthcare management, for healthcare managers. So it's improving management efficiency in healthcare system. So for this, we need to train healthcare managers, Russian healthcare managers, on international level, and just innovative way of training healthcare managers. Then we'll be able to reach the aim 78 years. Our school just created the score of all indicators for the programs, and we need to increase life expectancy of males to 74 years and the women to 81 years. And by this, we'll come for the level of the new European countries. So how the whole program will be managed? So as I said, we had a presidential degree, input the task, the aim and the task, and to the government. And then the government is obliged to create the national programs starting from the year 2019. And the main programs that will influence 78 years life expectancy is the health care national project здравоохранение, национальный проект здравоохранения, и национальный проект демографии, national program in demography. Let me briefly discuss this, how they will be managed. Everything will be managed on the level of the president, in the Presidential Committee for Strategic Planning. Then in the government will be another committee for project planning. And then in all ministries will be subcommittees for doing all this program. So this is busy slide, but this is the whole mega science of medical science and healthcare management with all aims, priorities, indicators, and programs. So as I said, Russian Academy of Medical Science helped, and our key academicians helped to prepare the government programs. And some of the topics from the programs, they were put in their core of the national project здравоохранение, healthcare, done by the Ministry of Health. And so these are 8 programs: primary care, circulatory diseases, morbidity and mortality decrease, oncology diseases control, and children health care. These are clinical programs, and organizational programs are providing medical institutions with a qualified personnel, methodological guidance of national medical institutions of the whole healthcare system, and creating uniform digital loop and development of expert of medical services. And for this, we need to increase the quality of the healthcare. So to finish with, now we have the aim. I will finish with the Friedrich Engels' words. With no unity of interest, there can be the unity of aims and no unity of action. Now we have the unity of aim. The president set the aim. So now we need to have the unity of action, and we have the unity of interest. I mean, Russia is a whole society. And let me finish with Nikita Khrushchev's words, said in October 1961, on the 22nd Communist Party Congress. Our goals are clear, tasks are defined. Get to work, comrades, товарищи. Thank you for your attention. And just to finish with, our mission of the school, which I had, high quality of medical care for the efficient healthcare management. Thank you. Any questions?
Somebody would like to ask a question? Please. Dr. Morris,
In the UK, there's some evidence that the increase in life expectancy is actually slowing, and that the difference between men and women is getting smaller. I wonder what you view as the reason for that difference in life expectancy between men and women, and do you have any evidence for the same trends?
The trend, the difference is because of the different lifestyle. This is alcohol consumption, tobacco consumption. These are two things that influence this. The second is the accessibility. Usually men, they don't like to visit medical hospitals. The women, they visit them. And that's why I think the accessibility of the healthcare, because of the man habit, is not so, the air is not so accessible. And we want to change this. And you know why the life expectancy slowing up in European countries? Because you already done everything. Healthcare spending is high. So I know that in the United States and in some European countries, you have public healthcare programs that influence tobacco and alcohol consumption and healthy lifestyles. And then our social economic status is much more higher. That's why you've done a lot, and that's why the life expectancy is not growing up. And we have to do a lot in alcohol consumption decrease, in tobacco consumption decrease, in healthy lifestyle introduction, in increasing healthcare system finance and efficiency.
any other questions? Professor Sinitsyn? Okay.
Because you are well known as one of the top national experts in public healthcare. Speaking about comparing organization of public healthcare in Russia and Great Britain, would you like to say in brief? Because some people say that they quite basically, you mentioned similar.
I mentioned they are similar. I think the Great Britain took the model that Russia had from the Soviet times. And so we have the same as you, gatekeeping. We have polyclinics, and the British colleagues have. And the only difference, I think, at the moment, that you spend 3 times higher public expenditures in healthcare system than we are in comparable prices.
Second, very short question, because we heard about the ambitious plans to reshape, reform healthcare and to achieve very good high targets. What was your impression, feeling? Is it feasible or not? I'm sorry for asking for such a question.
It's achievable. It's achievable, but as I mentioned, there should be 3 conditions. Number 1, the GDP grew 4%. Alcohol consumption decreased for 40% till the year 2024. And then tobacco consumption decreased twice. We need to decrease twice. And then healthcare expenditures should go up and efficiently spent. So I hope for the better.
Please, two other questions. You,
Yes.
Slightly 2 parts. One is that you've got this target for life expectancy, and I think we found in the UK that as life expectancy has grown, there are a lot of conditions which start to be a drain on resources. You're dealing with a much older population. So is that increased cost for care for things like dementia built into your plan to get to that target? And the second part is that goes along with that is life expectancy really the thing that we need to measure? And is there a comparison amongst countries of what you would call a good quality of life expectancy rather than absolute time to death?
It's a very important question. Another goal which was set, the healthy lifestyle, or the healthy life should continue till the age 67 years. So this is important. This is another goal. 78 years, this is a goal for life expectancy as a whole, and the healthy life expectancy till 67 years. So this is number 1. And the first part was of your question
was whether your model in what it's going to cost to get to your target life expectancy has got built into it the requirements that you're going to have to treat these other conditions.
So right now, life expectancy is 73 years in Russia. So it's not a question for us. Because, for example, in Great Britain, you have how many? Approximately, those who live after 75 years are 16% from the whole population, and we have only 11%. So it's a difference. So maybe as a next step, after the year 2024, we'll pay attention to this.
It's the last question.
But what I do know about kind of action in the UK and in Europe is that they ban smoking in public, so public place. So, and this has considerably dropped the number of people who smoke and therefore, as a consequence, we do something. Do you have like a similar kind of action in Russia, or just you?
So I just showed the slide where we implemented anti-tobacco law, and it is forbidden to smoke in public places, and it helped to decrease tobacco consumption in Russia almost for 22% for the last 6 years.
And you have like a ban on alcohol, or just increase the price of alcohol?
We'll increase the price of alcohol. We call this tax on alcohol. We want to do this. Then we'll have the mass propaganda in mass media to decrease alcohol consumption. Then we are planning to control the whole chain of alcohol distribution. And there are different proposals in this field. And we want to make it, the law even more strict.
No questions? Maybe the last. Is coffee influence lifetime or mortality? No?
I think this is a question for scientists.
You have coffee break.
Until